Well, I'm retired now, but in the National Film and Sound Archive, when it was split off from the National Library from 1968 to 2001, I've remained active in the profession in a variety of capacities, including teaching and university courses, a lot of writing, Memory of the World program, and my connection with the Friends of the National Film and Sound Archive, of which I'm currently the president. I have spent a lot of time, especially after retirement, in overseas travel, teaching and speaking at conferences and that kind of thing. My interest was in film. It was a childhood interest, and it sort of matured in various ways. After I had gone through my arts degree at university, I had to work out what I was going to do, and was offered the deal by the Department of Education so I could become a school teacher, or by the National Library so I could become a librarian. My interest, I took the National Library option because I had discovered that the National Library had a film section, old Australian films, and I thought it would be fascinating to work in that context. It was in 1968 that I moved to Canberra from Sydney, and I was initially the reference librarian in the film section at the library. My particular interest was in the archival aspect, the old films, which I found was a fairly minor activity, not a major activity. The main activity was a lending library of 60mm films. In the day when that was, in those pre-VHS days, when that was a huge enterprise to lend films across Australia and overseas, and that was the way people looked at documentary films. My abiding interest was the archive. My first article for Archives and Manuscripts, which was in 1995. It was called Sacrilege or Synthesis, exploring the philosophy of audiovisual archiving as an emerging profession. But that article signalled something that I was then working on, which then was taken up by UNESCO, and in 1998 I had written a book which UNESCO published called The Philosophy of Audiovisual Archiving. It's now in its third edition, and it's still current, and it has about, I think, 8 or 9 foreign translations. It's very widely read. So it's a standard text now in the field. But it delves into the fundamental principles of the field, what distinguishes it as a profession, how it relates to, let's call, traditional archiving or document archiving, and other fields like librarianship and museology. So that has a long history, but that particular article in Archives and Manuscripts was a kind of a way of kicking it off. It's hard because for people like us, if you did a psychological profile of people in if I call the collecting professions, we're mostly introverts. We don't like all these things where we have to intersect with the public space and argue our case. Much more inward looking. We would rather get on with the job, and we just expect the funny to come in, but it doesn't, of course. So we have to go against our natural preferences and learn. The Friends of the NFSA and the Australian Society of Archivists held a joint conference to reflect on and evaluate what had happened, and came up with some recommendations, and clearly the main recommendation was that the NFSA should be a statutory authority. The ASA and the Friends of the NFSA and 2 other bodies that had emerged by this time, the Australian Historical Association, the Historians Group, and another group called Archive Forum, which was a group of people with fairly well-known people who had direct knowledge of the NFSA and could authoritatively speak about it. Now, all these bodies have been engaged one way or another in advocating, for a separate body. So in 2006, in July 2006, they produced a joint paper which explained why the arrangement was not working, and why it could never work, and why the NFSA needed to be a separate statutory authority. It was widely dispersed. It's impossible to tell what effect it had, and really said there's only one way forward, and this is it. There was an election in 2007. A Labor government came in and promptly put that into practice. The incoming Arts Minister took the issue up straight away with the advocacy groups, and the NFSA got its own act effective 1st July 2008. So that was that's a very compact way of looking at a sequence of events in which the ASA and other groups were involved as advocates, quite successful. They were at the time quite dramatic events. It was a very successful advocacy exercise. It has to maintain its presence in universities and education. There have to be courses, and I think these are sometimes under threat as well. It has to be a visible advocacy body. So it is always going to be necessary, because without it, institutions and governments are left to their own devices. It has to be the body that says, hey, these are the needs, these are the standards, this is what has to be done, and gain public support for it. So those are the opportunities, or even the tasks, if you like. And in an age where governments are less responsive to freedom of information, they're much more reclusive now, they're less transparent. It comes down to bodies like the ASA to try to swim against that tide. The National Archives have done it a bit better than most, but you see things on their website, but you go to other websites, you see very little about how institutions came to be, why they are there, and their rationale. That's something I think the ASA should be encouraging, because it becomes a defence against attacks, against your independence, against funding, against loss of funding, all of those things. So that is the thing to be promoted and valued.